She came to say goodbye, but found someone else already there. A stranger with a letter, in her mother's handwriting, revealing a secret. That changed everything. She returned to her mother's grave and found another woman already there, crying for her. The October wind cut through Emily Turner's coat like a knife made of grief. She stood at the iron gates of Willow Creek Cemetery, her breath forming small clouds in the cold morning air. 5 years. It had been 5 years since she'd set foot in this place. 5 years since they'd lowered her mother's casket into the ground, while Emily stood there, numb and hollow, barely able to cry. Margaret Turner, beloved mother, devoted wife, gone at 57. Emily clutched the bouquet of white roses, her mother's favorite, and forced herself forward. The gravel path crunched beneath her boots, each step heavier than the last. She'd avoided this place, convinced herself she didn't need to stand over a stone to remember her mother. But therapy had finally broken through her walls. Dr. Richardson's voice echoed in her mind. You can't heal what you won't face. The cemetery sprawled before her, rows of headstones like silent witnesses to 1,000 untold stories. Emily knew the way by heart, even after all this time. Section D, row 7, third stone from the oak tree. But as she rounded the corner, her feet stopped moving. Someone was already there. A woman knelt at Margaret Turner's grave, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Dark hair fell around her face like a curtain, and in her trembling hands she held what looked like a letter, yellowed with age, the edges worn soft from being read too many times. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. The woman pressed her palm against the cold marble headstone, her voice breaking through the silence. I'm so sorry, Margaret. I should have come sooner. I should have been there. The intimacy in those words made Emily's blood run cold. Who was this stranger? Why was she crying over Margaret Turner as if she'd lost everything? Why was she talking to Emily's mother like they'd shared secrets Emily had never been told? The woman lifted the letter to her lips, kissed it gently, then noticed Emily standing there, frozen white roses trembling in her grip. Their eyes met, and in that single moment, Emily Turner's entire understanding of her mother's life began to crack open. The stranger's face went pale. She quickly tried to fold the letter, hide it, scrambled to her feet. But Emily saw it clearly now. The elegant handwriting on the envelope, handwriting she'd recognize anywhere, her mother's handwriting, and written across the front, in ink that had faded but never disappeared. For Laura always. Emily couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she was seeing. The woman, Laura apparently, stood frozen like a deer caught in headlights, the letter clutched protectively against her chest. Her eyes were red and swollen, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She was somewhere in her 50s, Emily guessed, with delicate features and an elegance that seemed almost out of place in a cemetery at dawn. I'm sorry, Laura stammered, her voice raw. I didn't know anyone would be here. Emily found her voice, though it came out sharper than she intended. That's my mother's grave. Laura flinched as if she'd been slapped. I know. Then what are you doing here? The question hung in the cold air between them like an accusation. Laura's hands trembled as she looked down at the letter, then back at Emily, clearly calculating whether to run or stay. Something in her expression shifted. Resignation, maybe, or acceptance of something inevitable. My name is Laura Jensen, she said quietly. And Margaret, your mother. She was what? Emily interrupted, stepping closer. The white roses fell forgotten to the ground. Who are you? Why do you have a letter in my mother's handwriting? Laura's eyes glistened with fresh tears. It's complicated. Uncomplicated. But Laura was already backing away, tucking the letter into her coat pocket. I shouldn't have come. This was a mistake. Panic surged through Emily. This woman, this stranger who appeared from nowhere crying over her mother's grave, was about to disappear with answers Emily didn't even know she needed. Without thinking, Emily reached out and caught Laura's wrist. Don't, Emily said, surprised by the desperation in her own voice. Please, I need to know who you are. Laura stopped, her whole body rigid. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, Laura turned back to face her. The morning light caught her profile, and Emily noticed something she hadn't before. A delicate silver necklace partially hidden beneath her collar. A locket, maybe. You have no idea what you're asking, Laura whispered. Then tell me. Laura closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, something had changed. The fear had given way to a different emotion. Grief, yes, but also something that looked like relief, like she'd been carrying a weight for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. "I knew your mother for over 30 years, Laura said, her voice steadier now. "We were close, very close. My mother didn't have friends," Emily shot back automatically, then immediately hated herself for how true it sounded. Margaret Turner had been kind but solitary, devoted to her family but somehow always distant, present but never quite there. Laura's lips curved into the saddest smile Emily had ever seen. "I wasn't her friend." The words landed like stones in water, sending ripples through Emily's understanding. "Then what were you?" Laura reached into her coat and pulled out the letter again. This time she didn't try to hide it. She held it out toward Emily with shaking hands. "Before she died," Laura said, "Margaret wrote several letters. This one. She asked me to keep it until the day you came here. She said you'd come eventually. She said you'd need to know." Emily stared at the envelope. Her mother's handwriting, those familiar loops and curves she'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists and notes left on the kitchen counter. But this was different. This was intimate, personal, written to someone Emily had never heard of. "Know what?" Emily asked, though part of her didn't want to hear the answer. Laura's hand remained extended, the letter trembling in the space between them. "The truth about who your mother really was." Emily's chest tightened. "I knew my mother." "Did you?" The question wasn't cruel. It was gentle, heartbroken, and devastatingly honest. Emily reached out slowly and took the envelope. It was heavier than she expected, not from weight but from the gravity of what it represented. "There's another letter," Laura said quietly. "One she wrote for you. She gave it to me years ago before she got sick. She made me promise to deliver it only if you found me first. She said if you came looking, it would mean you were ready." Emily's fingers traced the edge of the envelope. "Ready for what?" Laura looked past Emily toward the headstone, her expression distant and full of longing. "To learn that your mother had a whole life you never knew about. A life she kept hidden because she thought it would protect you, or maybe because she was protecting herself. I'm not sure anymore." The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the cemetery. Emily looked down at the letter in her hands, then back at Laura. "Tell me," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me who you are. Tell me who my mother was." Laura met her eyes, and Emily saw decades of secrets reflected there. "Not here," Laura said, glancing around the empty cemetery as if afraid the dead might overhear. "There's too much to say, too much to show you. But if you really want to know, if you're sure—" "I'm sure." Laura nodded slowly, accepting the weight of what came next. "Then we need to start at the beginning, the real beginning, before you were born, before your father, before everything you think you know about Margaret Turner." Emily sat in her car in the cemetery parking lot, Laura in the passenger seat beside her. The engine was off, the silence between them thick with unspoken words. The letter, Laura's letter, lay unopened on Emily's lap. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Before you read it," Laura said softly, "I need you to understand something. Your mother loved you more than anything in this world. Everything she did, every choice she made, every secret she kept, it was because she loved you." Emily's throat tightened. "Then why didn't she tell me herself?" "She tried." Laura's voice cracked. "So many times, but the words never came. And then she got sick and there wasn't enough time." A memory flashed through Emily's mind. Her mother in the hospital bed, morphine dulling the pain, but not the fear in her eyes. Margaret had reached for Emily's hand and opened her mouth to speak, but the words had dissolved into labored breathing. Emily had assumed it was just the medication, the exhaustion of dying. Now she wondered what her mother had been trying to say. "Who are you to her?" Emily asked again, needing to hear it plainly before she opened the letter. Laura turned to face her fully, and Emily could see the toll of years in the lines around her eyes. "We met when we were 17 years old. First day of senior year at Westfield High School. I was new to town. My father had just transferred for work. Margaret was assigned to show me around." Emily tried to imagine her mother at 17. It was difficult. Margaret Turner had always seemed ageless in that way mothers do, not old but never quite young either. "We became inseparable," Laura continued, her voice distant with memory. "Best friends," everyone said. "We did everything together. Studied, went to movies, talked for hours about our dreams. She wanted to be an artist. Did you know that?" Emily blinked. "No. She was brilliant, could paint anything. She had this way of seeing the world that was magical. We'd spend weekends in her garage studio, and she'd create these incredible landscapes, portraits, abstract pieces that made you feel things you couldn't name. This was a stranger Laura was describing. Emily's mother had never picked up a paintbrush, never mentioned art at all. She'd been a secretary at an insurance company, practical and efficient. Her life measured out in spreadsheets and scheduled meals. "What happened?" Emily asked. Laura's smile faded. "Life, reality, fear." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Your mother and we were more than friends, Emily. Much more. We fell in love." The words landed softly, but shook Emily's foundation nonetheless. "We were young and stupid and terrified," Laura continued. "It was 1988. Things weren't like they are now. Our families, our town, it wasn't safe to be who we were. So we hid it. We told everyone we were just friends. And in private, her voice broke. In private, we were everything to each other." Emily's mind reeled. Her mother, her quiet, reserved, straight-laced mother, had been in love with a woman, had hidden it, had buried it so deep that Emily had lived 32 years without the slightest hint. Then what? Emily managed to ask. Then her parents found out. Laura's hands clenched in her lap. "Someone saw us together, told Margaret's father. He was not kind. He gave her an ultimatum. End it or be disowned. No college fund, no family support, nothing. And Margaret, she was scared, we both were, she ended it." "And you just let her go?" "No." Laura's voice hardened with old pain. "I fought. I begged. I told her we could run away, start over somewhere else. But she wouldn't. She said she couldn't abandon her family, couldn't throw away her future for something the world wouldn't accept." A tear slipped down Laura's cheek. "So I left, moved away, tried to forget her. But you didn't." "No, I never did." Emily looked down at the letter, her mother's handwriting swimming before her eyes. She carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The letter was dated 6 months before Margaret's death. "My dearest Laura, if you're reading this to Emily, it means I've failed again. Failed to find the courage to tell her myself. Failed to be the mother who could look her daughter in the eye and say, 'I loved someone before your father. I loved her more than I've loved anyone. And I never stopped. I need you to tell Emily everything. Show her who I was before I became the woman she knew. Show her the art, the dreams, the life I buried because I was too afraid to live it. Tell her about the years we found each other again. Tell her about the secret meetings, the stolen moments, the way I've lived 2 lives for so long I sometimes forgot which one was real. Most of all, tell her this wasn't her fault. None of it. She deserves to know that her mother was flawed and frightened and human, that I made choices I regretted, that I lived with love and loss in equal measure. If she's angry, and she will be, let her be. She's earned that. But when she's ready, give her the second letter. The one I wrote for her alone. Thank you for being patient. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for loving me even when I didn't deserve it. Always yours, Margaret." Emily read the words 3 times before she could breathe again. "She found you again," Emily whispered. "You said you left, but she found you." Laura nodded, tears streaming freely now. 10 years after we said goodbye. She called me out of nowhere, said she couldn't stop thinking about me, that she'd made a mistake. But she was married by then. She had me. "Yes," Laura said simply. "She did." Emily's hands trembled as she folded the letter and placed it carefully back in the envelope. The world had tilted sideways, and she wasn't sure which way was up anymore. "Tell me how it started," she said, her voice hollow. "Tell me everything." Laura leaned back against the car seat, her eyes distant with memory. "It was the summer of 1987. We were both 17, about to enter our senior year. Margaret's family had just moved to Westfield. Her father got a job at the steel mill. I'd lived there my whole life." Emily tried to picture it. Her mother as a teenager in a small town, young and uncertain, arriving at a new school where everyone already knew each other. "The first day I saw her," Laura continued, "she was standing in the school parking lot, looking completely lost. She wore this yellow sundress, I remember it so clearly, and she had her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked terrified. A small smile played at Laura's lips, softening the grief in her eyes. I walked up to her and said, 'You look like you could use a friend.' And she looked at me with these huge eyes and said, 'I could use a miracle.' We both laughed, and that was it. That was the moment everything began." Emily felt like she was hearing about a stranger. Her mother had never been spontaneous, never laughed easily, never seemed young. "We were inseparable from that day forward," Laura said. "Every class together, every lunch, every weekend. My parents loved her. Her parents tolerated me, barely. They were strict, religious, very traditional. Margaret had to fight for every bit of freedom she got. What did you do together? Emily asked, hungry for details about this version of her mother she'd never known. Everything, nothing. The things teenage girls do. We'd drive out to the lake and talk until midnight, go to the movies and share popcorn, study at the library, and pass notes instead of actually studying. She showed me her art. God, her art was incredible. She had this ability to capture emotion on canvas, to make you feel things just by looking at her work. I never knew she painted, Emily said quietly. She stopped, Laura replied, pain flickering across her face. Later, after everything fell apart. But back then it was her entire world. She was going to apply to art school, had her heart set on Rhode Island School of Design. She had this whole plan mapped out. What happened to that plan? Laura's expression darkened. Me. I happened. The confession hung between them. It wasn't sudden, Laura continued. It wasn't some dramatic moment where we suddenly realized we were in love. It crept up on us slowly, like morning fog. One day we were best friends sharing secrets, and the next day I couldn't imagine my life without her. I couldn't breathe when she wasn't around. When did you know? Emily asked. Homecoming dance, October of senior year. She wore this emerald green dress that made her eyes look like sea glass. Some boy, Jason Parker I think his name was, asked her to dance, and I felt this surge of jealousy. Pure, irrational jealousy. I wanted to pull her away from him, tell him she was mine, not his. Laura's voice grew softer, more intimate. After the dance, we went to our spot by the lake. We sat on the hood of my car, looking at the stars, and she asked me why I'd been so quiet all night. I told her I didn't want to talk about it, but she pushed, the way she always did when she knew I was hiding something. And finally I just said it. I think I'm in love with you. Emily held her breath. The silence that followed was the longest 30 seconds of my life, Laura said. I thought I'd ruined everything. Thought she'd be disgusted, horrified, that I'd lose my best friend and the girl I loved all at once. But then she turned to me and she had tears streaming down her face and she said, "Thank God, I thought I was the only one." A tear slipped down Emily's cheek before she could stop it. We kissed that night, Laura continued, under the stars, scared and exhilarated, and completely certain that what we felt was real. We promised each other we'd never let anyone take that away from us. But someone did. Yes. Laura's voice turned bitter. 3 months later in January, Margaret's cousin saw us together. We were in my car parked behind the old movie theater. We thought we were being careful, but we weren't careful enough. She told Margaret's father. Emily felt sick. What did he do? He waited until I left one evening after dinner at their house. Then he sat Margaret down and told her she had a choice: end whatever sinful relationship she had with me, or he'd cut her off completely. No college money, no family support, no home to come back to. He said he'd rather have no daughter than a daughter who was... Laura's voice cracked. He used words I won't repeat. And my mother chose him, Emily said flatly. She chose survival, Laura corrected gently. She was 17 years old, Emily, terrified, with no resources and no backup plan. I don't blame her for the choice she made. I never did, but you were hurt. I was destroyed. Laura's honesty was brutal and beautiful. She ended it 2 days later, met me at the lake and told me we couldn't see each other anymore, that it had been a mistake, that she wasn't like that we needed to move on. I begged her to reconsider. I told her we could leave, go somewhere no one knew us, build a life together. But she wouldn't. She couldn't. So what happened? Laura turned to look at Emily directly. I left town the day after graduation. Didn't say goodbye. Couldn't bear to. I moved across the country, tried to start over, tried to forget her. And for 10 years I almost convinced myself I had. But then she found you. Yes, Laura whispered. 10 years later, when you were 5 years old, she found me. Emily's head spun with the weight of revelation. She was married. She had me. Why would she reach out to you? Laura's expression was complex. Part sadness, part understanding, part something Emily couldn't quite name. Because she'd never stopped loving me. And because, I think, she'd finally realized that pretending to be someone you're not doesn't make you happy. It just makes you hollow. Tell me how it happened, Emily demanded, needing to understand. Laura pulled out her phone and scrolled through old photos until she found what she was looking for, a scanned image of a handwritten letter. This is how it started. Emily took the phone and read, "Laura, I don't know if this address is still current or if you'll even want to hear from me after what I did, but I need you to know, not a single day has passed that I haven't thought about you. Not one. I'm married now. I have a daughter. On paper, I have everything I was supposed to want. But I'm not happy, Laura. I don't know if I've ever been truly happy since the day I let you go. I'm not asking for anything. I don't expect you to forgive me or even respond. I just needed you to know that what we had was real. It mattered. It still matters. If you're willing to talk, even just once, I'd like to hear your voice again. Monsieur Emily looked up at Laura. She took a huge risk sending this. She did, Laura agreed, and I almost didn't respond. I'd built a whole life without her, or at least I thought I had. I was living in Seattle, working as a graphic designer, dating casually but never seriously. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. I held onto it for 3 weeks before I finally called the number she'd included. What did you say? I said, why now? Laura's voice was thick with emotion. And she said, because I'm dying inside, and you're the only person who ever made me feel alive. Emily felt something crack inside her chest. This was her mother, the woman who'd packed her school lunches and attended parent-teacher conferences and seemed so ordinary, so unremarkable. And yet beneath that surface had been this entirely other person, desperate and longing and profoundly unhappy. We talked for 3 hours that first night, Laura continued. She told me about her marriage, how she'd met your father at church, how he was kind but they'd never had a real connection, how she'd convinced herself that love was something that happened in movies, not real life. She told me about you, how much she adored you, how being your mother was the only thing that made sense, but not enough to stay away from you. Laura flinched but didn't deny it. We agreed to meet just once, she said, just to have closure. We met halfway between Willow Creek and Seattle at a coffee shop in Portland. I remember walking in and seeing her sitting by the window, and it was like no time had passed at all. She looked at me and I looked at her, and we both knew. Knew what? That we were still in love, that we'd never stopped, that everything we'd built in the years apart was just scaffolding around the empty space where the other person should have been. Emily felt nauseous. So what? You became, what? Affair partners. It wasn't an affair, Laura said firmly. It was survival for both of us. That's a convenient way to rationalize betrayal. Laura accepted the barb without flinching. You're right to be angry, but I need you to understand. Your mother never stopped being your mother. She never stopped caring for your father in her way. She was two people. The person she had to be for the world and the person she actually was when no one was watching. And you were okay with that? Being a secret? No, Laura admitted. I hated it. We fought about it constantly. I wanted her to leave, to choose us, to stop pretending. But she couldn't. She had you, and she couldn't bear the thought of how divorce would affect you. And she was terrified. Terrified of judgment, of losing her family, of what people would say. So she lived a lie. She lived 2 truths, Laura corrected gently, and it destroyed her piece by piece, year by year. But she couldn't see a way out. Emily stared out the car window at the cemetery beyond. How long? How long did this go on? 23 years, Laura said quietly. From the year you turned 5 until the month before she died. 23 years. Nearly Emily's entire conscious memory of her mother. 23 years of secrets and hidden phone calls and stolen moments. Where did you meet? Emily asked, morbidly curious now. Everywhere. Nowhere. She'd tell your father she was going to conferences for work, or visiting her sister, or taking art classes, which actually became true eventually. She started painting again, when she was with me. We'd rent a cabin upstate once a month, and she'd bring her supplies, and we'd spend the weekend just being ourselves. Did my father know? I don't think so. He never said anything, never confronted her. Either he didn't know or he chose not to see it. And me? Did I never notice? Laura's expression softened with sympathy. You were a child, Emily, and then a teenager wrapped up in your own life. And your mother was very, very careful. She kept us completely separate. She never once slipped up, never brought anything from her life with me into her life with you. Except the guilt, Emily said bitterly. I remember that. She always seemed distant, like she was carrying something heavy. She was, Laura whispered. She was carrying all of us. You, your father, me, herself. And the weight of it was crushing her. Emily turned back to face Laura. She got sick. Cancer, right? Pancreatic cancer. By the time they caught it, it had already spread, and you couldn't visit her in the hospital. Your father made sure of that. I tried. Drove 6 hours to Willow Creek and showed up at the hospital, but the nurses had been given strict instructions. Family only. I wasn't family. I was nobody. The pain in Laura's voice was raw and fresh, as if the rejection had happened yesterday instead of 5 years ago. The last time I saw her, Laura continued, was 2 weeks before she died. She managed to sneak away from the hospital for an hour, told everyone she needed fresh air. We met in the hospital parking lot, in my car. She could barely walk. The cancer had taken everything from her, her strength, her hair, her hope. But she held my hand and she told me she loved me. She said, "This is the real me. Remember me like this, not like the person in that hospital bed." Tears streamed down both their faces now. "She gave me the letters that day," Laura said. "Told me about you, about how she'd never found the courage to tell you. Made me promise I'd wait for you to find me, that I wouldn't force it. She said you'd need time to grieve the mother you thought you knew before you could meet the mother she actually was." Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "Why didn't she just tell me, even once? Why did it have to be a secret until she was gone?" "Because she loved you," Laura said simply. "And she was terrified that if you knew the truth, you'd love her less." "I want to see it," Emily said suddenly, wiping her tears away with the back of her hand. "Everything. I want to see the life she kept hidden." Laura studied her carefully. "Are you sure? Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Your memory of your mother will change forever." "It's already changed," Emily replied. "At least if I see it, I'll know the truth instead of just imagining it." Laura nodded slowly, then pulled out her keys. "Follow me, but Emily—" She paused, her hand on the door handle. "Promise me you'll keep an open mind. Your mother wasn't perfect. Neither am I. What we had was complicated and messy and sometimes painful, but it was real. It was love." 20 minutes later, Emily found herself standing outside a modest townhouse in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town. Laura unlocked the door and gestured for Emily to enter. The interior took Emily's breath away. It was an art studio, but not just any studio. Every surface, every wall, every corner was filled with Margaret Turner's work. Paintings lined the walls, vibrant landscapes, abstract explosions of color, intimate portraits that seemed to look directly into the viewer's soul. Sculptures rested on shelves, sketches were pinned to boards, half-finished canvases leaned against the furniture. This was a home, a secret home where her mother had created and lived and breathed in ways Emily had never witnessed. "This is where she came," Laura said softly, watching Emily take it all in. "This is where she was Margaret, not Mrs. Turner or your mother or anyone's wife. Just Margaret." Emily walked slowly through the space, touching picture frames, running her fingers over paint-splattered tables, examining the initials signed in the corner of each piece. "MT. She bought this place 15 years ago, Laura explained. Told your father it was an investment property. She'd come here 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes more. She'd paint, we'd talk, we'd just exist together." On the mantel, Emily found photographs. Margaret and Laura at a beach, arms around each other, smiling with a freedom Emily had never seen on her mother's face. Margaret painting in this very room, concentration etched on her features. Margaret and Laura on what looked like a hiking trail, sweaty and laughing. In every photo, her mother looked young, not in years, but in spirit. "I look at these," Emily said, her voice cracking, "and I don't recognize her." "That's because you only knew half of her," Laura said gently. "The half she felt safe showing you." Emily picked up one particular photo, her mother standing in front of a large canvas, paint on her hands, joy radiating from her smile. "When was this taken?" 3 years before she got sick. That painting—" Laura pointed to a stunning landscape hanging on the far wall. "She was working on that day. It took her 6 months to finish. She called it home." Emily crossed to the painting. It showed a house by a lake, warm light glowing from the windows, 2 silhouettes visible inside. The technique was masterful, the emotion palpable. This wasn't amateur work. This was the product of decades of practice and passion. "She was incredible," Emily whispered. "She was," Laura agreed, "and she gave it all up for years because she was told that loving art, loving me, was wrong. When we found each other again, she started painting again too. Said it was like rediscovering a part of herself she'd thought was dead." Emily opened a drawer in the desk and found stacks of journals. She pulled one out randomly, dated 7 years ago, and opened to a random page. "Saw Emily at the grocery store today. She was with that boy she's been seeing." "Michael? Matthew?" She looked happy, and that made my heart sing. But I also felt this terrible ache, knowing she was standing 10 feet away, and I couldn't tell her about the painting I just finished, or about the weekend Laura and I spent in the mountains, or about the person I am when I'm not her mother. Is it selfish to want both? To to want her love and Laura's love and the freedom to be honest about who I am? Or is it selfish to keep hiding, to keep lying, to keep these worlds separate because I'm too afraid to let them collide? I don't know. All I know is that every day I wake up and play this role, I lose a little more of myself. But I can't stop, because the alternative, losing Emily, watching disappointment replace love in her eyes, is worse than dying slowly from the inside. Emily closed the journal, unable to read more. Her mother's pain bled through every word. She struggled with it, Laura said unnecessarily. She wanted to tell you, especially as you got older, as you became an adult with your own life. But the moment never felt right. And then she got sick and suddenly there wasn't time. She could have told me in the hospital, Emily said, anger flaring. She could have said something, anything. She tried, Laura insisted. I know she tried. But the morphine made everything fuzzy. And you were grieving and she was dying. The words wouldn't come, so she wrote them instead. Laura pulled an envelope from her pocket, different from the first one. This is for you, the letter she wrote specifically for you. Emily stared at the envelope as if it might burn her. Her name was written on the front in her mother's elegant script. Emily, read this when you're ready to know me. I can't, Emily said, backing away. Not yet. I need time to process everything. Laura nodded, understanding. Keep it, read it when you're ready, but Emily, there's more I need to show you. More you need to understand about what your mother wanted for you. How can there possibly be more? Laura's expression was serious. Because your mother didn't just live a secret life. She left instructions, a plan, things she wanted you to have, to know, to do. She spent the last months of her life trying to prepare for this moment, for the day you'd finally meet me and learn the truth. Emily felt exhausted, overwhelmed, angry, and curious all at once. What kind of instructions? The kind that might change your life, Laura said simply, if you're willing to listen. Laura led Emily to a back room in the townhouse, a smaller, more intimate space that felt like an office or study. A large wooden desk dominated the room, and on it sat a leather-bound box with a brass lock. When your mother found out she was sick, Laura began, pulling a key from around her neck. She didn't tell me right away. She kept it hidden for almost 3 months. By the time she finally confessed, the cancer had already spread. Emily leaned against the doorframe, watching as Laura unlocked the box with trembling hands. She showed up here one evening, unannounced, which was unusual. We always planned our time together carefully, but that night she just appeared at the door and I knew immediately something was wrong. She was crying. Your mother never cried. Laura opened the box, revealing stacks of documents, more letters, photographs, and small objects wrapped in tissue paper. She told me she had maybe 6 months, that the doctors had been clear. This wasn't something she could fight. It was something she could only delay. Laura's voice broke. And then she said the thing that destroyed me. I won't get to say goodbye to you properly. They won't let you at the hospital. So we have to say it now. But you saw her again, Emily said. You said you met in the parking lot 2 weeks before she died. That was a miracle, a stolen moment. But that night when she first told me, that was when we planned everything. That was when she created this. Laura gestured to the box. This is her legacy for you. The truth she couldn't speak. Emily approached slowly, looking into the box. On top was a photograph she'd never seen. Her mother as a young woman, maybe 19 or 20, standing in front of an easel, paintbrush in hand, eyes bright with ambition. That was taken the summer before she met your father, Laura explained. She was working at an art gallery saving money for RISD. She was going to apply that fall. What stopped her? She got pregnant. The words hung in the air like a verdict. With me, Emily said flatly. Yes. She met your father at a church social that August. They went on a few dates. She was trying to prove to her parents that she was normal, trying to convince herself too, I think. One thing led to another, and by September, she knew she was pregnant. Emily felt sick. So I'm the reason she gave up everything. No, Laura said firmly, gripping Emily's shoulders. Don't you dare think that. Your mother never once, not in all the years I knew her, regretted having you. You were the light in her darkness. You were the one pure, uncomplicated thing in her life. She loved you absolutely and without reservation. But she resented me. She resented the circumstances. She resented the choices she felt forced to make, but she never resented you. Laura released Emily and turned back to the box. That's why she created this. She wanted you to know her, yes, but more than that, she wanted you to learn from her mistakes. She wanted you to live the life she couldn't. Laura began removing items from the box, laying them carefully on the desk. Birth certificates, Emily's of course, but also what looked like amended documents, bank statements from an account Emily had never heard of, legal papers, a flash drive, more photographs, and at the bottom, a thick manila envelope, sealed with wax. "What is all this?" Emily asked. "Your inheritance," Laura said. "The real one?" Emily blinked in confusion. "My father handled the estate. There was the house, some savings, her life insurance." "That was the official estate," Laura interrupted. "This is the other one, the one she built in secret over 23 years. Laura picked up the bank statements and handed them to Emily. Emily's eyes widened as she scanned the numbers. Deposits spanning decades, growing into a substantial sum, nearly $500,000. "How?" Emily breathed. "She sold her paintings," Laura explained. "Under a pseudonym. She had a gallery connection in New York, someone I introduced her to. She'd ship them pieces every few months, and they'd sell them under the name M. Grace. The money went into this account. She never touched it. She was saving it for you." Emily felt dizzy. "My father never knew. No one knew except me and the gallery owner. Your mother was meticulous. Every penny accounted for, every transaction clean. She wanted to make sure that when you finally learned the truth, you'd have resources, freedom, the ability to make choices she never got to make." Emily picked up the flash drive. "What's on this?" "Videos, audio recordings." She spent the last 6 months of her life documenting everything. Her story, her relationship with me, her regrets, her hopes for you. She wanted you to hear it all in her own words. The manila envelope caught Emily's attention. "And this?" Laura's expression grew serious. "That's the part I struggled with most. That's the part I almost didn't give you." "Why?" "Because it's not just about the past. It's about the future. Your mother made a request, a wish, something she wanted you to do after she was gone." Laura met Emily's eyes. "Something involving me." Emily's stomach dropped. "What kind of request?" Laura pulled out a chair, gesturing for Emily to sit. "You need to read the letter first, the one she wrote for you. That will explain everything." Emily sat, her hands shaking as she pulled out the envelope she'd been avoiding. She broke the seal and unfolded several pages of her mother's handwriting. The date at the top was 3 months before Margaret died. "My darling Emily, if you're reading this, it means Laura has found the courage to tell you everything. It means you know about me, the real me, and you're probably angry and confused and feeling betrayed. You have every right to those feelings. I want to start by saying I'm sorry. Sorry for the lies, sorry for the secrets, sorry for not being brave enough to tell you the truth while I was alive. I told myself I was protecting you, but really, I was protecting myself. I was a coward. You need to know that every choice I made, marrying your father, staying in Willow Creek, keeping my relationship with Laura hidden, was made from a place of fear. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of losing you. And in trying so hard not to lose you, I lost myself instead. I don't want that for you, Emily. I don't want you to wake up at 57 years old and realize you've been living someone else's life. I don't want you to discover too late that the things you denied yourself, the love, the passion, the truth, are the things that actually matter. That's why I'm leaving you this inheritance. Not just the money, though. I hope it helps. But the knowledge, the history, the art, the proof that I was more than just your mother, more than just someone's wife. I was a person with dreams and failures, and a love that sustained me through decades of pretending. Laura has agreed to be the executor of this part of my estate. She'll show you everything, the studio, the paintings, the journals, the recordings. She'll answer your questions. She'll help you understand. But I'm asking for something more, and this is the part that might upset you. Emily, I want you to get to know Laura, really know her, not as the woman who had an affair with your mother, but as the person she actually is. She's brilliant and kind and funny and flawed. She understood me in ways no one else ever did, and I hope that she might be able to help you understand yourself too. I've set aside money for you to take a trip together. Laura knows where. It's a place that was important to us, a place where I felt most like myself. Go there with her, spread my ashes there, and in spending that time together, maybe you'll discover things about yourself that you didn't know were there. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not even asking you to understand. I'm just asking you to be open, to be curious, to be brave in the ways I never was. You are the best thing I ever created, Emily. Not my paintings, not my secret life, but you. You are kind and strong and capable of so much more than you know. Don't let fear stop you from becoming everything you're meant to be. I love you. I always have. I always will, even in death. I remain your mother, Margaret P.S. The sealed envelope contains the details. The money is in an account under your name. Laura has the transfer papers. And the paintings in the studio? They're yours. Sell them, keep them, burn them. Whatever you need to do. But know that every single one was painted by a woman who was trying to find her way back to herself. And Emily, please don't hate me. Or if you do, don't hate me forever. Emily read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. When she finally looked up, Laura was watching her with infinite patience. She wants me to take a trip with you, Emily said hoarsely. To Mendocino, Laura confirmed, on the northern California coast. We used to meet there twice a year. There's a cliffside overlook where she'd paint the ocean. She always said it was the most peaceful place on earth. And spread her ashes there. Yes, she wanted to be in a place where she was happy, where she was free. Laura paused. But Emily, I won't push this. If you want nothing to do with me after today, I'll understand. I'll transfer the money, give you the keys to this place, and disappear from your life. Your mother's wishes don't override your comfort. Emily looked around the studio, at the evidence of her mother's hidden life. She thought about the woman she'd believed Margaret Turner to be, quiet, resigned, ordinary. And she thought about the woman Margaret actually was, passionate, conflicted, desperately in love. I need time, Emily finally said. It's too much to process all at once. Of course, but I don't want you to disappear. The words surprised Emily as much as they seemed to surprise Laura. I'm angry and I'm hurt and I don't understand any of this, but you're the only person who really knew my mother, and I think I need that. I need to know who she was. Laura's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Emily stood, tucking her mother's letter carefully into her bag. Can I take some of these things? The journals, maybe? The flash drive? Take whatever you want. It's all yours. Emily gathered several journals, the flash drive and a smaller photograph of her mother laughing, genuinely, joyfully laughing in a way Emily had never witnessed in person. At the door, she turned back to Laura. The trip to Mendocino. I'm not ready to decide about that yet, but I'm not saying no either. That's more than I hoped for, Laura said softly. Emily nodded and walked to her car. As she drove away, she caught a glimpse of Laura in the rearview mirror, standing in the doorway of the townhouse, looking small and sad and relieved all at once. The weight of her mother's secrets pressed down on Emily's chest, but beneath the hurt, something else stirred. Curiosity, understanding, and maybe eventually forgiveness, but not yet. For 3 weeks, Emily didn't contact Laura. Instead, she immersed herself in her mother's hidden life like an archaeologist uncovering a lost civilization. She watched every video on the flash drive, hours of footage of Margaret sitting in the studio, talking directly to the camera, telling her story. Emily saw her mother laugh, cry, rage against the circumstances that had trapped her. She heard Margaret describe falling in love with Laura in vivid detail. The joy and terror of that first kiss, the agony of their separation, the overwhelming relief of finding each other again. I know you'll judge me, Margaret said in one video, filmed just weeks before she died. She looked skeletal, the cancer having ravaged her body, but her eyes were clear. I judged myself for years. But Emily, I need you to understand. Loving Laura didn't mean I didn't love you or your father. The heart has more capacity than we give it credit for. I was just never brave enough to live in that fullness. Emily read the journals cover to cover. Decades of her mother's innermost thoughts, dreams deferred, frustrations swallowed, moments of pure happiness stolen from the margins of a conventional life. In one entry from 15 years ago, Margaret wrote, Emily turns 17 tomorrow, the same age I was when I fell in love with Laura. I look at my daughter and I see so much possibility, so much freedom she doesn't even realize she has. She can be whoever she wants, love whoever she wants. The world is changing. Slowly, but it's changing. I hope she never has to choose between authenticity and security. I hope she never knows what it feels like to split yourself in half just to survive. The paintings in the studio became familiar to Emily. She visited 3 times a week, spending hours sitting among her mother's creations, trying to understand the woman who'd made them. Some pieces were light and joyful, ocean scenes, flower gardens, abstracts in warm colors. Others were dark and turbulent, storms, shadows, figures obscured by fog. One painting in particular haunted Emily. It showed 2 women standing on opposite sides of a river, reaching toward each other but unable to touch. The technique was masterful, the emotion devastating. On the back, Margaret had written, "The distance between who I am and who I'm allowed to be, 2012. Emily found herself crying in front of that painting more than once. She also researched her mother's artistic career. Under the name M. Grace, Margaret Turner had sold dozens of paintings over 2 decades. Gallery shows in New York, San Francisco, Seattle. Collectors who paid thousands for her work. Art critics who praised her emotional depth and raw vulnerability. Her mother had been successful, celebrated even, in a world that had no idea who she really was. On the 22nd day after their meeting at the cemetery, Emily finally called Laura. "I want to see the rest," Emily said without preamble when Laura answered. "You said there was more, show me." They met at the studio that evening. Laura had clearly been taking care of the place. Everything was dusted, organized, the plants watered. She'd been waiting, Emily realized, hoping Emily would come back. "There's a storage unit," Laura began, "where your mother kept the things she couldn't risk having here. Things that would raise too many questions." "What kind of things?" Laura handed Emily a key. "See for yourself." An hour later, Emily stood in a climate-controlled storage unit staring at 2 decades worth of her mother's secret life meticulously preserved. There were boxes labeled by year, each containing correspondence, photographs, receipts from trips, ticket stubs from concerts and plays, even clothing, dresses and shirts Emily had never seen her mother wear. But what stopped Emily cold was the wall at the back of the unit. It was covered in photographs, not just snapshots but professional portraits, Margaret and Laura together, clearly taken by someone who knew their relationship. The photos spanned years, the two of them young, middle-aged, growing older together, in a parallel timeline Emily had never known existed. In one photo, they stood in front of the Eiffel Tower. In another, they hiked through red rock canyons. There were pictures from beaches, mountains, cities, small towns, always together, always happy. "We took 1 trip a year," Laura explained quietly. "Your mother would tell your father she was going to conferences or visiting her sister in Arizona. We'd meet somewhere and spend a week just living, being ourselves without hiding." Emily touched one photograph, her mother and Laura, at what looked like a pride parade, both wearing rainbow colors, holding hands, grinning at the camera. "When was this?" Emily asked. "San Francisco, 2015. Your mother's first and only pride. She cried the entire day. Happy tears. She said it was the first time she felt like she could exist in the world as herself." Emily felt a stab of pain so acute she had to sit down. Her mother had experienced this joy, this freedom, this celebration of identity, and Emily had known nothing about it. While Emily was probably home watching TV or out with friends, her mother was across the country, holding hands with a woman she loved, finally allowed to be authentic. "There's something else," Laura said hesitantly. "In that box, the one marked, 'For Emily.'" Emily found the box and opened it. Inside was a smaller locked box with a note, "Open only after you've seen everything else." "Do you have the key?" Emily asked. Laura produced another key from around her neck. "Your mother gave me 2 keys, one for the studio, one for this. She said the studio would help you understand. But this," she gestured to the box, "this would change everything." Emily's hands shook as she inserted the key and turned it. Inside were legal documents, papers with official seals, lawyer letterheads, signatures and dates. Her eyes scanned the first page, not understanding at first. Then the words clicked into place, and her entire world shifted. "This is a will," Emily said slowly, "but not the one from probate court." "That's right. This one names Laura Jensen as co-beneficiary, as someone with legal standing in the estate." Laura's expression was pained. "Keep reading." Emily flipped through more pages. Financial documents showing joint accounts, hidden accounts that predated Emily's birth, insurance policies with Laura as a beneficiary. And then, buried in the stack, she found it. A marriage certificate. "No," Emily whispered. "Yes," Laura said quietly. "You were married. How is that even possible?" "My mother was married to my father. Not legally. Not in a way that mattered to the state." Laura's voice was gentle but firm. "Your parents had a church ceremony, but they never filed the paperwork. Your father assumed they had. Your mother told him the documents were filed, but they weren't." Emily's mind reeled. "So my entire life, my parents weren't actually married? Not legally, but you and my mother were. In a private ceremony in Canada, yes. 20 years ago. We couldn't file it in the United States. Gay marriage wasn't legal yet. And even after it became legal, we didn't want to risk exposure. So it stayed a secret. Valid in Canada, invisible everywhere else." Emily looked at the certificate. Margaret Turner and Laura Jensen, married in Vancouver, British Columbia. 2 women in love, making a commitment they couldn't share with the world. Why? Emily asked. Why would she do this? Why not divorce my father and be with you openly? Because she was terrified of losing you, terrified of the judgment, terrified of small-town gossip and religious condemnation, and the look on her parents' faces if they knew the truth. Laura's voice cracked, and by the time those fears might have lessened, we'd been living the lie for so long that unraveling it seemed impossible. Emily stared at the marriage certificate, at her mother's signature next to Laura's, at the proof that everything she'd believed about her family was built on carefully constructed fiction. My father, Emily said slowly. Does he know? About me specifically? I don't think so. But about your mother's unhappiness, he had to have known on some level. People don't live together for 30 years without noticing the distance. And me? Was I? Emily couldn't finish the question. You were loved, Laura said firmly. By your mother absolutely and completely. By your father, in his way. Whatever else was false in that house, your mother's love for you was real. Emily closed the box, unable to look at the documents anymore. I need air. They stepped outside the storage unit into the cool evening. Emily leaned against the car, breathing deeply, trying to anchor herself in reality when reality kept shifting beneath her feet. The trip to Mendocino, Emily finally said. The one my mother wanted us to take together. Yes? When can we go? Laura looked surprised. Are you sure? No, Emily admitted. I'm not sure of anything anymore. But my mother wanted this, and I think I need to see the place where she was happy. I need to understand what it felt like for her to be free, even if just for a little while. Laura nodded slowly. I can arrange it. There's a cottage we used to rent. It's probably still available. How long? She wanted us to spend a week, but we can do less if that's too much. Emily thought about her job, her apartment, her normal life waiting for her back in the city. None of it seemed important now. Nothing seemed real compared to the magnitude of what she'd learned. A week, Emily decided. Let's do the week. Okay. Laura pulled out her phone. I'll make the arrangements. We can leave next weekend if that works for you. It works. They stood in silence for a moment. 2 women bound together by a dead woman's secrets and a love that had refused to die despite decades of suppression. Laura, Emily said quietly. Yes? Thank you for waiting. For not pushing. For letting me come to this in my own time. Laura's eyes glistened. Your mother made me promise. She said if I pushed too hard, you'd run. She knew you needed to discover the truth at your own pace. She knew me better than I thought. She knew you perfectly, Laura corrected. She just couldn't show you that she did. Emily nodded, too emotional to speak. They exchanged details about the trip, practical matters that felt absurdly mundane given the circumstances. Then Emily drove home, her mind full of revelations, her heart torn between anger and understanding. That night, she dreamed of her mother. Not the tired, reserved woman Emily remembered, but the vibrant, passionate artist from the photographs. In the dream, Margaret painted at her easel while Emily watched, and when she finally turned around, she smiled, genuinely, freely, and said, I'm sorry it took so long for you to meet me. Emily woke with tears on her cheeks and a decision solidifying in her heart. She would take the trip. She would spread the ashes. She would try to understand, not for her mother's sake, not even for Laura's, but for her own. Because Emily was beginning to realize that learning her mother's truth might be the key to discovering her own. The night before they were supposed to leave for Mendocino, Emily sat in her apartment surrounded by her mother's journals. She'd been avoiding one in particular, the final journal, the one Margaret had kept during her last months. Now, with a glass of wine and a quiet house, Emily finally opened it. The entries were sparse, sometimes just a few sentences, written in handwriting that grew shakier with each page. The cancer had been stealing her mother's strength, but not her clarity. September 12th. Doctor says 3 months, maybe 4. I asked him to be honest. No false hope. He said the pain will get worse, that there will come a point where I won't be able to hide it anymore. I'm not afraid of dying, I'm afraid of not having said the things that matter. September 20th told Laura today. Watched her heart break in real time. She wanted to tell Emily, to tell Robert, to bring everything into the light so I could die with the people I love around me. But I can't. Even now, I'm too much of a coward. I wonder if Emily will ever forgive me for that. October 3rd. Started writing letters. 1 for Laura. 1 for Emily. 1 for Robert. though I don't know if he'll ever read it. What do you say to the man you've lied to for 30 years? Sorry for the deception, but I never actually loved you the way a wife should. There's no kind way to say that. October 15th. Can't stop thinking about Emily, about all the conversations we never had. She doesn't know I'm gay, doesn't know about Laura, doesn't know about the art or the trips or the woman I actually am beneath the mother she thinks she knows. I wanted to protect her from judgment, but now I wonder if I was really just protecting myself. October 28th. Emily came by today, brought groceries and cleaned the kitchen. She has no idea how sick I am yet. I'm getting better at hiding it. She talked about her job, her boring boyfriend Michael, her plans for Thanksgiving, normal things, safe things, and I sat there smiling and nodding, dying inside because I want to tell her everything. I want to say, Emily, I've been lying to you your entire life. I'm not who you think I am. I'm in love with a woman. I've been in love with her for 30 years. I paint in secret. I have a whole other life you know nothing about. And I'm terrified that if you learn the truth, you'll hate me. But I just smiled and said, that sounds nice, honey. Coward. November 10th. Pain is getting worse. Robert wants me to go to the hospital. I've been putting it off because I know once I go, I won't come back out except in a body bag. Made Laura promise something today. Made her swear that she wouldn't approach Emily until Emily came to her first. If Emily never visits my grave, never goes looking, then Laura leaves her alone. But if Emily comes, if she seeks out the truth, then Laura tells her everything. Let her choose, I told Laura. Let her choose whether she wants to know. Laura cried. Said it might be years before Emily visits my grave. Said she doesn't know if she can wait that long holding on to these secrets. I said, then wait for me, because I need you to. November 24th. In the hospital now. They found out how bad it was. Robert is angry I waited so long. Emily is scared. I can see it in her eyes every time she visits. She holds my hand and tries to be brave, but she's falling apart inside. My beautiful daughter, watching me die, with no idea who I really am. Laura tried to visit yesterday. Nurses turned her away. Family only. She texted me later. I love you. I'll always love you. I wanted to scream. Wanted to tell everyone, that woman is my wife. Let her in. But I didn't. Even now, I'm too afraid. December 2nd. Snuck out today for an hour. Told everyone I needed fresh air. Robert was reluctant but let me go. Met Laura in the parking lot. Sat in her car. Could barely walk. She held me and we both cried. Gave her the letters. Gave her the keys. Gave her instructions for Emily. Help her understand, I said. Help her see that I wasn't just a liar. That I loved deeply, even if I loved in secret. That I was broken and beautiful and flawed and human. Laura said, she'll hate us both. I said, maybe, but maybe she'll understand. And maybe understanding will set her free in ways I never was. This is probably the last time I'll see Laura outside of my dreams. That knowledge is crushing me. December 8th. Emily came today. Sat with me for 3 hours. We didn't talk much, I don't have the energy. But she held my hand and I watched her face and tried to memorize every detail. She has my eyes, my stubbornness, my tendency to hide when things get hard. I wanted to tell her, don't be like me, don't hide who you are, don't wake up at 57 and realize you've wasted decades pretending. But I just squeezed her hand and said, I love you. She said, I love you too, Mom. If those are the last words between us, at least they were true. December 11th. Can't write much anymore. Hands too shaky, mind too foggy. But I need to write this. Emily, if you ever read this, I'm sorry. For the lies, for the cowardice, for not being brave enough to show you all of me. But I'm not sorry for loving Laura. That was the one true thing in a life full of compromises. And I'm not sorry for having you. You were my miracle, my joy. The proof that even a broken person can create something beautiful. Live bravely, love openly. Don't hide like I did. And if you can, forgive me. The journal entry ended there. Emily checked the date, December 11th. Her mother had died on December 14th. 3 days between those final words and the end. Emily closed the journal and let the tears come. She cried for her mother's pain, for the wasted years, for the love that had been forced into shadows. She cried for herself, for the daughter who'd never known her own mother. And she cried for Laura, who'd loved and waited and lost and loved again, despite everything. When the tears finally stopped, Emily felt something shift inside her. The anger was still there, but it was softer now, mixed with compassion and grief and a profound understanding of human frailty. Her mother had been scared, trapped by the era she was born into, by family expectations, by internalized shame. She'd made choices Emily wouldn't have made, lived lies Emily couldn't imagine maintaining. But she'd also loved fiercely, created beautiful art, and tried, however imperfectly, to leave her daughter a roadmap to a freer life. Emily picked up her phone and texted Laura, "I'm ready for tomorrow, for Mendocino, for all of it." Laura's response came quickly. "Thank you for giving her and me this chance. I'll pick you up at 8 a.m. Emily spent the rest of the night packing. She included the urn with her mother's ashes, the letters, several journals, and the photograph of Margaret laughing. She was bringing her mother, all of her mother, to the place where she'd been happiest. And maybe in doing so, Emily would finally be able to say goodbye to the woman she thought she knew, and hello to the woman who'd actually existed all along. The drive to Mendocino took 8 hours. For the first 2, Emily and Laura barely spoke, both lost in their own thoughts, the weight of the journey ahead pressing down on them. But somewhere around the 4th hour, as they stopped for coffee at a roadside diner, Laura began to talk. "The first time your mother and I came here," Laura said, stirring sugar into her coffee, "was about 6 months after we reconnected. She was terrified someone would see us, kept looking over her shoulder, jumping every time someone glanced our way." "When did she stop being afraid?" Emily asked. "Here in Mendocino, almost immediately." Laura's expression grew distant with memory. There was something about this place, the isolation, the fog rolling in from the ocean, the way you could disappear into the landscape. She felt anonymous here, free. By our second day, she was holding my hand in public. Can you imagine? After 10 years of hiding, she was holding my hand where people could see. Emily tried to picture it. Her mother, anxious and guarded, suddenly allowing herself that simple intimacy. "What was she like here?" Emily asked. "Really like?" Laura smiled, and it transformed her face. Happy. Genuinely, unguardedly happy. She'd wake up early and paint the sunrise, spend hours on the cliffs with her easel, trying to capture the light on the water. We'd cook dinner together, drink wine, talk until 2 in the morning about everything and nothing. She'd laugh, really laugh, the kind that comes from your belly. I don't think she laughed like that anywhere else. Not even at home? Especially not at home. Laura's expression grew sad. At home, she was performing, playing the role of wife and mother. She did it well, you never suspected, did you? But it exhausted her. Here she could stop pretending. They finished their coffee and continued driving. As they got closer to the coast, Emily noticed Laura's posture changing, tension giving way to something like anticipation. "You loved coming here too," Emily observed. "I loved being with the real Margaret," Laura corrected. "Geography didn't matter, but yes, this place is special to me. It's where we built our real life together, even if it was only in week-long increments." The cottage Laura had rented was perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It was small and weathered, with large windows facing the water, and a deck that seemed to hang suspended over the waves below. "We stayed here every time," Laura said as she unlocked the door. "Your mother called it our real home. She said it was the only place she felt like herself." Inside, the cottage was simple but beautiful. Hardwood floors, comfortable furniture, a kitchen with a window perfectly positioned to watch the sunset. Emily could imagine her mother here, relaxed and at peace. "She kept clothes here," Laura said, opening a closet. Inside hung several dresses and shirts Emily had never seen. She had a whole wardrobe just for these trips, things she'd never wear at home. Brighter colors, bolder patterns. The real Margaret wore color. Emily reached out and touched a vibrant red sundress. Can I see pictures of her here?" Laura pulled out her phone and scrolled through years of photos. Margaret in the red dress, dancing in the cottage living room. Margaret on the deck, painting. Margaret and Laura hiking through redwood forests. Margaret at a farmer's market, arms full of flowers, grinning at the camera. In every image, she looked young, not in age, but in spirit. The tension Emily always remembered in her mother's shoulders was gone. Her smile reached her eyes. She looked, Emily realized with a start, like someone in love. "She's so different," Emily whispered. "She was herself," Laura said simply. That evening they sat on the deck, watching the sun set over the Pacific. Emily held the urn with her mother's ashes in her lap, and Laura held a box of Margaret's painting supplies. "She wanted us to paint together," Laura explained. "She left instructions, said that before we spread her ashes we should each create something here, something that represents what we need to say to her." "I don't know how to paint," Emily protested. "Neither did I at first. Your mother taught me." She said painting isn't about skill, it's about honesty, about putting what's inside you onto canvas even if it's messy. They set up easels on the deck the next morning. Laura provided Emily with a blank canvas, brushes, and an array of paints. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, waves crashing against the rocks below. "Don't think," Laura instructed gently. "Just feel. What do you want to say to your mother? What does it look like?" Emily stared at the blank canvas for a long time. Then slowly she began to paint. She painted in shades of grey and blue, confusion and sadness. But as she worked, other colours crept in. Gold for the moments of joy in her childhood, deep purple for the grief of loss, and finally, hesitantly, she added threads of green, the colour of new growth, of understanding beginning to take root. The painting was abstract, chaotic, nothing like her mother's skilled work, but it was honest. Laura painted beside her, creating a landscape of the cliff where they stood, but in her version 2 figures stood at the edge, holding hands, facing the endless ocean together. They painted for hours, lost in the meditative rhythm of brush on canvas. When they finally stepped back, both exhausted, Emily looked at her creation and saw her journey, from the darkness of not knowing, through the storm of revelation, towards something that might eventually become acceptance. "She'd be proud of you," Laura said softly. "How do you know?" "Because she told me once that all she wanted was for you to feel what you felt without apology, to be honest about your pain, your anger, your confusion." She said, "I want Emily to be brave enough to be messy because I never was." That afternoon, they hiked to a cliffside overlook, the place Margaret had painted dozens of times, the place Laura said was her mother's favorite spot on earth. The view was breathtaking. Waves crashed against rocky outcroppings hundreds of feet below. Seabirds wheeled overhead. The wind carried the salt smell of the ocean and the distant sound of seals barking. "This is it," Laura said. This is where she wanted to rest. Emily held the urn, her hands trembling. She'd expected this moment to feel more ceremonial, more profound. Instead, she just felt tired and sad and strangely at peace. "Do you want to say something?" Laura asked. Emily nodded. She opened the urn and looked down at the ashes, all that remained of Margaret Turner, the woman who'd been her mother and a stranger, familiar and unknown, present and always somehow absent. "Mom," Emily began, her voice catching, "I don't understand all the choices you made. I don't know if I ever will. Part of me is so angry that you kept this from me, that you lived a lie for so long, that you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth." Tears streamed down her face. "But I'm starting to understand that you were scared, that you were doing the best you could with the life you were given, that you loved me, even if you couldn't show me all of yourself." She looked at Laura, who was crying silently. "And I'm grateful that you had Laura, that you had this place, that somewhere in some small part of your life you got to be happy, got to be free, got to be yourself." Emily lifted the urn. "I'm setting you free now, Mom. For real this time. No more hiding. No more secrets. Just you in the place where you were happiest." She scattered the ashes. They caught in the wind, swirling in the sunlight, before being carried out over the ocean. Some settled on the rocks below. Some disappeared into the waves. Some were carried up and away toward the sky. Laura stepped beside Emily and scattered flowers, white roses, Margaret's favorite. "Goodbye, my love," Laura whispered. "Thank you for every stolen moment. Thank you for teaching me that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. Thank you for trusting me with your truth, even when you couldn't share it with the world." They stood together as the last of the ashes dispersed. 2 women bound by their love for a third woman who'd been brave enough to love but not brave enough to live openly. After a long silence, Emily spoke. "Tell me a story about her. Something I don't know. Something that shows me who she really was." Laura smiled through her tears. "There was a time maybe 10 years ago when we came here in winter. There was a storm, massive waves, rain, wind. Your mother stood right here on this cliff, and she opened her arms wide like she was trying to embrace the chaos. She shouted into the wind, 'This is what it feels like to be alive.'" Laura's voice broke. "And I thought, this is the woman the world should have known. This wild, passionate, fearless woman who was brave enough to stand in a storm and claim her existence. But the world only got to see the quiet, careful version, the version she thought was acceptable." "I wish I'd known this version," Emily said. "You can still know her," Laura replied. "Through the art, the journals, the stories I can tell you. She's not gone, Emily, not completely. She lives in every painting she created, every word she wrote, Every choice you make to be braver than she was. Emily nodded slowly. The week. She wanted us to spend a week here together. Yes. Then let's do it. Let's spend the week. I want to know her. All of her. Will you tell me everything? Laura's expression was a mixture of relief and trepidation. Everything. Everything. The good, the bad, the complicated. I want to understand what it was like to love her. What it was like to be loved by her. I want to know the woman behind the mother I thought I knew. It won't be easy to hear. Nothing about this has been easy, Emily said. But I'm here. I'm ready. So tell me. Tell me everything. 1 week later, Emily and Laura returned to Willow Creek Cemetery. The morning was cold and grey, much like the day Emily had first encountered Laura at her mother's grave. But everything was different now. They walked side by side to Margaret Turner's headstone, carrying fresh flowers and a small package wrapped in brown paper. Emily no longer felt the sharp stab of confusion and betrayal she'd experienced before. Instead, she felt something more complex, grief mixed with understanding, anger softened by compassion, loss tempered by connection. The week in Mendocino had been transformative. Laura had shared everything, stories spanning 3 decades, memories tender and painful, truths Emily had needed to hear. They'd laughed over Margaret's terrible cooking attempts and her habit of singing off-key in the shower. They'd cried over the moments she'd been forced to choose between authenticity and safety, always choosing safety until those brief escapes to the coast. Emily had learned that her mother loved thunderstorms and hated romantic comedies, that she could quote poetry from memory and had a weakness for chocolate cake at midnight, that she'd been terrified of dying, but more terrified of living dishonestly, that she'd wanted to tell Emily the truth 100 times, but could never find the words. She was human, Emily had said on their last night in the cottage, flawed and frightened and trying her best. Yes, Laura had agreed, just like all of us. Now standing at the grave, Emily knelt and placed the flowers, white roses, against the headstone. Laura knelt beside her, and together they unwrapped the package. Inside was a small bronze plaque. Emily had commissioned it during their time away, and it had arrived just that morning. The inscription read, Margaret Turner, 1958, 20-20 artist, dreamer, beloved. I was brave enough to love, even when I couldn't be brave enough to live openly. May those who follow be braver than I was. Do you think she'd like it? Emily asked. I think she'd cry, Laura said, and then she'd probably say it was too much, but yes, she'd like it. They placed the plaque beside the headstone, a private memorial to the private life Margaret had lived. I've been thinking, Emily said, still kneeling, about the studio, the paintings, her work. What about them? I want to show them. Really show them. Not hide them away like she did. I want the world to see what she created, who she really was. Laura looked surprised. An exhibition, a gallery show, under her real name, with her story, all of it, told honestly. She hid for so long. I think it's time to bring her into the light. That's beautiful, Emily. But are you sure? It means telling people about her relationship with me, about the lies she told, about everything. I'm sure. Emily's voice was firm. She spent her whole life afraid of judgment. I won't let fear silence her story now that she's gone. She deserves to be remembered for who she actually was, not who she pretended to be. Laura's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Then Emily reached out and took Laura's hand, the first time she'd initiated physical contact between them. I'm not saying this is easy, Emily said. I'm still processing, still grieving the mother I thought I knew, still angry sometimes that she didn't trust me with the truth. That's fair. But I also understand now. I understand why she was scared, why she made the choices she did, and I'm grateful. Emily's voice cracked. I'm grateful that she had you, that she wasn't alone, that she got to experience real love even if it was in secret. She loved you just as much, Laura said softly. Never doubt that. Her love for you was never a lie. I know. And Emily realized she meant it. Her mother had been complicated, capable of great love and great deception simultaneously. She'd been flawed and courageous, weak and strong, present and absent. She'd been human. Emily stood, pulling Laura up with her. I want you to be part of the exhibition. I want you to help curate it. You knew her work better than anyone. You knew her better than anyone. I'd be honored. And Laura, I want to stay in touch. I want to hear more stories. I want to understand more about who she was, who you both were together. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Laura smiled through her tears. I'd like that very much. They turned to leave the cemetery together, and Emily noticed something she hadn't before. Despite the November cold, a single rose bush near her mother's grave had bloomed, impossibly, defiantly, out of season. White roses, perfect and fragile against the grey sky. "She's here," Laura whispered. "Can you feel it?" And Emily could, not in any supernatural sense, but in the way the story itself felt alive, how her mother's truth, finally spoken, seemed to hum in the air around them. Margaret Turner hadn't been able to live authentically, but her daughter would make sure she was remembered authentically. As they walked toward the cemetery gates, Emily felt something shift inside her. The anger hadn't disappeared completely, but it had made room for something else. Compassion, understanding, and maybe, eventually, forgiveness. "Laura," Emily said as they reached their cars. "Yes, thank you for waiting for me, for not giving up, for loving her enough to honor her wishes, even when it meant carrying all those secrets alone." "Thank you for being brave enough to listen," Laura replied, "for giving me the chance to finally share her with someone who loved her too." They exchanged a look, not quite family, not quite friends, but something uniquely their own. Two women connected by a third, building a new relationship from the ashes of old secrets. Emily got into her car and looked back one last time at her mother's grave. The bronze plaque glinted in the weak sunlight, a promise kept, a truth finally told. "I see you now, Mum," Emily whispered. "I finally see all of you." And as she drove away, Emily felt lighter than she had in years. She was carrying her mother's legacy forward, not the sanitized version the world had known, but the complicated, beautiful, heartbreaking truth. Margaret Turner had spent her life hiding, but Emily would spend hers revealing. The art would be shown, the story would be told, and somewhere, Emily thought, her mother was finally free. 3 months later, the gallery in Portland was packed. Emily stood near the entrance, watching people move through the exhibition she'd titled "The Hidden Canvas, The Secret Life and Art of Margaret Turner." The walls displayed Margaret's paintings chronologically, each accompanied by excerpts from her journals, photographs from her life with Laura, and explanatory text that told the full, honest story. Visitors moved slowly through the space, reading, looking, understanding. Emily watched a young woman stop in front of the painting, "The Distance Between Who I Am and Who I'm Allowed to Be." The woman stood there for a long time, tears streaming down her face, and Emily understood. Her mother's story wasn't just about one woman's hidden life. It was about everyone who'd ever felt they had to hide who they truly were. Laura appeared beside Emily, elegant in a black dress, her eyes bright with emotion. "She'd be so proud of you," Laura said. "I think she'd be terrified," Emily replied with a sad smile. "But yes, maybe proud too." An art critic from a major newspaper approached them. "Ms. Turner, I'd love to speak with you about your mother's work. This exhibition is extraordinary. The technical skill, but also the emotional resonance, and the story behind it, it's deeply moving." Emily glanced at Laura, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd be happy to talk," Emily said, "but you should speak with Laura Jensen as well. She knew my mother's work intimately. She understood the artist in ways no one else did." "Of course." The critic extended her hand to Laura. "Ms. Jensen, I'd very much like to hear your perspective." As they talked, Emily wandered through the exhibition alone. She paused at a photograph of her mother and Laura on the Mendocino cliffs, both of them laughing, wind-blown and happy. Beneath it, a quote from Margaret's journal, "In this place, with this woman, I am finally, fully, completely myself. If I could give my daughter one gift, it would be this: the courage to live as yourself openly and without apology. The courage I never had." Emily touched the photograph gently. "I'm trying, Mom," she whispered. "I'm trying to be brave enough for both of us." A young woman approached, maybe 20, with nervous energy and hope in her eyes. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Emily Turner?" "I am. I just wanted to say thank you for sharing your mother's story. I've been struggling with coming out to my family. Reading about Margaret, seeing how she suffered from hiding, it made me realize I don't want to live like that. I don't want to wait until I'm gone for people to know who I really am." Emily felt tears prick her eyes. She'd be glad to hear that. That's exactly what she'd want. The young woman smiled, nodded, and moved on. But her words stayed with Emily. This was why she'd done it. Not just to honor her mother, but to help others avoid her mother's fate. To show that living honestly, even when it's difficult, is better than living comfortably, but inauthentically. Laura rejoined her after the interview. "How are you holding up?" Better than I expected, Emily admitted. It feels right having her story out in the world. No more secrets, no more hiding. She's free now, Laura said. Finally, completely free. They stood together watching strangers connect with Margaret's art and story. And Emily realized that her mother had been right about one thing. Art was about truth, about capturing something essential and making it visible. Margaret Turner had painted her inner life on canvas because she couldn't live it openly. But now, through this exhibition, through Emily's courage to reveal what had been hidden, that inner life was finally, beautifully, painfully visible. Her mother's secret was a secret no more. And in that revelation, both Margaret and those who came after her found a kind of freedom she'd never experienced while alive. Emily looked at Laura, this woman who'd loved her mother faithfully through decades of hiding, who'd waited patiently for Emily to be ready, who'd honored Margaret's wishes even when it cost her everything. "Laura," Emily said. "Yes? Would you like to have dinner tonight? There's more I want to know. More stories I want to hear. I think I'd like to keep learning about her, about you both." Laura's smile was radiant. "I'd love that." As they left the gallery together, Emily felt her mother's presence, not as a ghost, but as a legacy, a reminder to live bravely, love openly, and never hide the most essential parts of yourself. Margaret Turner had spent her life in shadows, but her daughter would live in the light. And that, Emily thought, was the best way to honor the woman her mother had been, and the woman she'd always wanted to become. Sometimes the greatest love is the one that's kept secret. Sometimes the greatest truth is the one revealed after death. And sometimes the bravest thing a daughter can do is refuse to let her mother's story die in darkness. This is a story about secrets, love, identity, and the courage it takes to be fully honestly yourself, even when the world tells you that you shouldn't be. In memory of all those who loved in secret, who dreamed in silence, and who waited for a world that came too late.